Stop scrolling for 1 second. I want you to answer a question. What does respect look like to you? We think it's about power, about money, about being the loudest person in the room. But what if real respect is found in the exact opposite? What if it's found in being the quietest? This is the true story of Elara, a waitress who was invisible to everyone. She was just another uniform, another pair of hands. But she had a secret, a skill nobody bothered to see. And in one night, in one of the most expensive restaurants in New York, she used that secret to do the one thing no one else could: listen. And that one act of listening didn't just change her life, it brought an entire room of millionaires to their knees. You will not believe what happened next. The Onyx Room wasn't just a restaurant, it was a stage. Perched 60 floors above Manhattan, it was a soundproofed world of hushed carpets, clinking crystal, and air that smelled faintly of truffle oil and old money. The staff moved like shadows, trained to be invisible, efficient, and silent. And in this silent, gilded cage, Elara Vance was the most invisible of all. To the clientele, the hedge fund managers, the tech bro heirs, the wives on their third divorce, Elara was just Waitress, a hand that refilled a $500 bottle of Cabernet, a pair of eyes that studiously avoided looking at the diamonds draped on their necks. But Elara was not invisible. She was a sponge. She was 26, but her eyes held the weary caution of someone much older. She lived in a shoebox apartment in Queens, a 30-minute walk and 2 train rides from the polished marble of the Onyx Room. Every cent of her meager salary, every dollar of her pooled tips, went to one of 2 things: the staggering student loan debt for a degree she couldn't use, or the even more staggering medical bills for her mother, Evelyn, whose body was slowly being betrayed by multiple sclerosis. Elara's degree wasn't in hospitality. It was in East Asian Studies and International Trade. Her senior year, she had been the star of her program, the one who'd spent a year abroad in Kyoto, the one who didn't just speak Japanese, but understood it. She understood the kata, the form. She understood the wa, the harmony. She understood that in Japan, the most important words are the ones not spoken. All that knowledge, all that passion had qualified her to do one thing: ask, still or sparkling. Her manager, a slick reptilian man named Mr. Markson, loved to remind her of her place. Markson, with his too tight suits and his breath that always smelled of stale coffee and self-importance, was a petty tyrant. "Vance," he'd hissed earlier that evening during lineup, his eyes raking over her uniform. "Table 12. The big one, the Thorn Party. They own half of downtown. Don't breathe on them. Don't look at them. Don't exist." "Got it?" "Yes, Mr. Markson." "This isn't your community college debate club," he sneered, somehow knowing exactly where her insecurities lived. "These are real people. Don't screw it up." Elara just nodded, the familiar hot knot of humiliation coiling in her stomach. She fixed her apron, her hands steady. She was a professional. She could be invisible. She could be silent. She was, after all, just the waitress. She walked onto the floor, the vast, dark expanse of the dining room twinkling with the lights of the city far below. She saw table 12, the best in the house, a secluded alcove overlooking the park. There were 5 men. One was clearly the shark in this tank, Julian Thorne. He was American, the CEO of Thorne Global Logistics. He had a predator's smile and the restless energy of a man who didn't just own the room, but the building. With him were 2 younger, slicker versions of himself, his vice presidents, David Chen and Laura Reed. They were loud, laughing too hard at Thorne's jokes, their movements sharp and self-assured. And then there were the other two men. They were the reason for the dinner. They were the ones Thorne was performing for. They were Mr. Robert Ando and Mr. Henry Sato. To the rest of the staff, they were just two more suits. But Elara knew. She clocked it instantly. They were Nisei, second-generation Japanese-American, but they moved and spoke with the deliberate, profound stillness of their heritage. They were the Japanese billionaires the kitchen had been whispering about all week, the silent, invisible money behind a new $2 billion international fund. They were the ghosts in the machine. And as Elara approached with her silver water pitcher, she heard Mr. Sato murmur something to Mr. Ando, his voice so low no one else could have caught it. He spoke in Japanese. Kono hitotachi wa watashi tachi o baka ni shite iru. Elara's hand didn't even tremble. Her face remained a perfect mask of polite indifference. But inside, her blood turned to ice, because she had understood every single word. These people, Mr. Sato had said, are treating us like fools. The dinner was a masterclass in failure. Elara moved in and out of the conversation's orbit, a silent comet of bread baskets and water refills. From her vantage point, she wasn't just serving food, she was watching a multi-billion-dollar deal disintegrate in real time. Julian Thorne, David, and Laura were putting on a classic American corporate show. It was all loud projections, backslapping confidence, and disruptive synergy. David was running a slide deck on a tablet, jabbing his finger at graphs that all pointed up and to the right. And as you can see, gentlemen, David announced, his voice slicing through the restaurant's quiet hum, our logistics framework will disrupt the entire Pacific market. We're not just moving boxes, we're changing the game. Mr. Ando and Mr. Sato watched, their faces placid, unreadable masks. They nodded politely. Mr. Sato took a delicate sip of his 400-a-bottle water. Elara, while clearing the appetizer plates, heard Mr. Ando's quiet reply to his partner, again in Japanese. Gemu o kaeru. Kare wa jibun no ashi o fumirete iru koto. Nisai kizuite inai. Changing the game, he doesn't even realize he's stepping on his own feet. Laura Reed, Thorne's other VP, leaned in, her smile wide and artificial. What we bring, Mr. Ando, is speed. Your current partners in Tokyo are traditional. We're agile. We're fast. She emphasized the words as if speaking to children. Mr. Ando simply smiled. A very American perspective, Ms. Reed. The smile didn't reach his eyes. Thorne, oblivious, laughed. That's what we do. We break things. We move fast and break things, right? Now let's talk numbers. David, pull up the acquisitions sheet. As David fumbled with the tablet, Mr. Ando and Mr. Sato began to converse quietly. They were no longer trying to be discreet. They assumed they were in a cone of linguistic silence, shielded by the arrogance of their hosts. They assumed the pretty little waitress was deaf and dumb. But Elara was listening, and what she heard made her stop, her hand frozen on a wine glass. They haven't even mentioned the Kitano Port Protocol, Mr. Sato said, his voice laced with a fine, cold contempt. This entire proposal is built on the old Osaka-Kobe framework. It's obsolete. The new regulations make their entire logistics chain uninsurable. Mr. Ando nodded, his gaze dark. It's not just incompetence, Sato-san. It's arrogance. They didn't do the work. They think a loud presentation and a big steak are a substitute for nemawashi. Nemawashi, the careful, behind-the-scenes work of building consensus, the root binding. It was a concept Elara had written a 30-page thesis on. Thorne's team hadn't just ignored it, they had actively bulldozed it. And Section 7, subsection B, Mr. Ando continued, the liability clause. It's insulting. They're trying to push all contractual risk onto us. They must think we are simple fishermen." Elara felt a cold dread creep up her spine. This wasn't a negotiation. It was an execution. Thorne and his team were the ones on the chopping block. They just didn't know it. Mr. Ando and Mr. Sato were moments away from walking out, and Thorne would lose a deal that, according to the whispers, was worth more than his entire company. She backed away from the table, her heart hammering against her ribs. She glanced at Mr. Markson, who was watching the table like a hawk from across the room. He shot her a venomous look that clearly said, "Stop lingering." Elara retreated to her station, her mind racing. It was none of her business. She was just the waitress. She should keep her head down, collect her tip, and go home to pay for another week of her mother's medication. But as she stood there, she thought about her father. He was a good man, an honest man who had run a small import-export business. He had been a man who believed in doing the work. He was ruined by a man just like Julian Thorne, all flash, no substance, who had used a hidden liability clause to bankrupt him. That failure had cost him his health, his pride, and, eventually, his life. She looked back at the table. Thorne was laughing again, a big, braying sound. Mr. Sato was checking his watch. It was happening. It was happening all over again. The main courses arrived, a silent ballet of servers placing perfectly cooked fillets and artfully drizzled sauces. The conversation had died. Thorne, David, and Laura were finally sensing the chill in the air, but they mistook it for negotiation tactics. "So," Thorne said, cutting into his steak, "I think we're all in agreement. This is a game changer. We'll have our legal teams circle up tomorrow to finalize." Mr. Ando placed his silverware perfectly on his plate, his meal untouched. It was a signal so loud, Elara felt it like a physical blow. In Japanese culture, it was a gesture of profound, final rejection. Mr. Sato followed suit. "Actually, Mr. Thorne," Mr. Sato said, his English suddenly crisp and formal, "I believe we have all we need. If you'll excuse us, we have an early flight." The blood drained from Julian Thorne's face. "What? Wait, we haven't even had dessert." "That will not be necessary," Mr. Ando said, folding his napkin. "Thank you for the presentation." Thorne and his team were frozen, a tableau of dawning panic. David looked like he was going to be sick. Laura's plastic smile was cracking at the edges. "Gentlemen, please," Thorne stammered, his predatory confidence gone. "If there's an issue, let's discuss it. Is it the percentage?" "We can talk. It is not the percentage," Mr. Ando said, his voice flat. He was already signaling to his security detail by the door. "It is a fundamental incompatibility. We wish you a good evening." They were standing up. The deal was dead. $2 billion. Gone. Mr. Markson was now power-walking towards the table, his face a mask of sweaty panic. He thought the service was the problem. He was coming to apologize, to offer free champagne, to completely and utterly miss the point. And at that exact moment, from the table adjacent, a woman's voice, sharp and laced with entitlement, sliced through the tension. "Excuse me, girl!" Elara turned. It was a woman in a garish leopard print dress, dripping in gold. Her name was Mrs. Delacroix, a restaurant regular, notorious for her cruelty. "My wine," Mrs. Delacroix snapped, holding up her glass. "It's warm. Did you even chill it? Or did you just breathe on it? What is wrong with you?" Elara was trapped between two collapsing worlds. The public humiliation by Mrs. Delacroix and the private, catastrophic implosion of Table 12. "I apologize, Mum. I will fetch you a new—" "You'll fetch nothing. You've been loitering," Mrs. Delacroix hissed, loud enough for the whole section to hear. "Staring at that table over there. Are they more important than me? Do you know who I am? Mr. Markson arrived, his face purple. Mrs. Delacroix, is there a problem? Vance, what did you do? She's incompetent, Mrs. Delacroix declared. I was just... Ilara stammered, looking at Mr. Markson, then at Mrs. Delacroix, and then at table 12, where Mr. Ando and Mr. Sato were already shrugging into their coats. And that's when it happened. All the frustration, all the invisible work, all the humiliation, the nights spent rubbing her mother's aching legs, the memory of her father's "for sale" sign on their lawn, the years of being told she was nothing more than a pair of hands. It all broke. She looked at Mr. Markson's terrified face. She looked at Mrs. Delacroix's sneering contempt. She looked at Julian Thorne's pathetic, desperate confusion. And then she looked at Mr. Robert Ando and Mr. Henry Sato. She straightened her spine. The apron, the uniform, all of it, suddenly fell away. She was no longer Ilara Vance, waitress. She was Ilara Vance, expert in East Asian trade, the only person in a 60-story building who knew the truth. She took one deep, steadying breath. She turned her back on Mrs. Delacroix. She walked past the apoplectic Mr. Markson. She ignored the stunned VPs. She walked directly up to Mr. Ando and Mr. Sato, planted her feet, and bowed. It wasn't a waitress's nod. It was a deep, formal, 45-degree bow, a gesture of profound respect and apology. The entire restaurant, which had been buzzing with the Delacroix drama, went utterly, completely silent. Then, in flawless, business-formal Japanese, Keigo, Ilara Vance spoke. Ando-sama, Sato-sama, moshi wake gozaimasen. Mr. Ando, Mr. Sato, my deepest apologies. The words cut through the silence. They were not loud, but they had the density of a singularity. Everything in the room was instantly pulled toward her. Mr. Ando and Mr. Sato, halfway into their coats, froze. Their heads snapped toward Ilara. Their eyes, previously bored and dismissive, were now wide, sharp, and electric. Julian Thorne, David, and Laura stared, their jaws slack. They had no idea what she'd said, but they knew, instinctively, that the axis of the universe had just shifted. Mr. Markson looked as if he'd been shot. "Vance! What in God's name do you think you're—" Mr. Ando held up a single, elegant hand. Markson fell silent. Mr. Ando's gaze was fixed on Ilara. He replied in Japanese, his voice sharp, almost an accusation. "Anata wa der desu ka? Who are you?" Ilara rose from her bow, her gaze steady, respectful and unflinching. "Watakushi wa Ilara Vance to moshimasu," she said, her voice clear and strong. "Tada no waitoresu desu. My name is Ilara Vance. I am only a waitress." She continued, the Japanese flowing from her with the precision of a surgeon. "I have been serving your table this evening, and my ears are not stone. I could not help but overhear your concerns. Please forgive my impertinence. It is not my place." Mr. Sato stepped forward, his eyes narrowed. "You understood us?" "Hi," Ilara confirmed. "I understood your frustration regarding the Kitano Port Protocol and your legitimate concerns about Section 7, Subsection B, and the general lack of nemawashi." The name drop of the obscure protocol and the specific business culture term hit the two men like a physical force. They exchanged a look of pure, unadulterated shock. Julian Thorne, sensing the shift, grabbed his VP's arm. "What is she saying? David, what the hell is she saying?" David, who had listed conversational Japanese on his resume, was pale. I don't know, sir. It's very formal. She's talking about a port?" "Shut up, David," Thorne hissed. Ilara continued, her focus solely on the two Japanese executives. "I am nobody, gentlemen. I am just a waitress who poured your water. But my father, My father was a man who believed in doing the work. He taught me that a contract built on arrogance is a house built on sand. She turned her head, just slightly, to include Julian Thorne in her peripheral vision. Your hosts, she said, the Kago becoming even more lethally polite, are trying to sell you a house on a fault line during an earthquake. They mistook your politeness for weakness. They mistook your silence for agreement. Mr. Sato was speechless. Mr. Ando, however, looked intrigued. A flicker of something, amusement, respect, danced in his eyes. You are very bold, Vance-san, Mr. Ando said in Japanese. To say such things, these are not a waitress's words. These are not a waitress's words, Elara agreed, a flash of her old fire returning. They are the words of a woman who spent a year in Kyoto, studying the exact trade agreements you are discussing. They are the words of a daughter who watched her father lose everything to a man who didn't read the fine print in Section 7. She took a breath, holding the attention of the entire, silent room. Mrs. Delacroix was a statue, her wine glass forgotten. Mr. Markson looked like he was about to faint. The deal, Elara said, is dead. I know that, and you are right to walk away. It is an insulting proposal. It is, Mr. Sato confirmed, his voice flat. But, Elara said, what if the proposal itself is not the real problem? What if the logistics are sound, but the messengers are broken? This was a gamble, a massive one. Mr. Ando tilted his head. Explain. The Kitano Protocol, Elara said, switching to English for the first time so Thorne and his team could hear. You're right, it's not in their presentation. That's because it's a new addendum, only ratified 3 months ago. It wasn't in the main trade brief. It was, however, discussed in Nihon Kizai Shimbun's analysis last Tuesday. She looked at Thorne's team. You all missed it. David and Laura blanched. She was right. And Section 7B, Elara continued, her voice ringing with an authority that stunned everyone. The liability clause. It's a standard American boilerplate. It was a lazy copy-paste. Whoever drafted it. She glanced at Laura. Didn't realize it directly contradicts Japanese international commerce law. It's not just insulting. It's unenforceable. It's worthless. Julian Thorne looked at his VPs, his face a thundercloud. Is she right? Laura's face was white. Julian, it's complicated. Is she right? Thorne's voice was a low growl. Yes, Mr. Ando said, saving Laura the trouble. She is. On all points. She has said more in 2 minutes than your team has said in 2 hours. The room was so quiet, Elara could hear the ice melting in Mrs. Delacroix's glass. Then the restaurant exploded into chaos. Vance, you're fired! The scream came from Mr. Markson. He had finally rebooted, and his default setting was panic-fueled rage. He grabbed Elara's arm, his fingers digging into her bicep. You are fired! Get out! Harassing customers, insulting VIPs, security. Elara didn't flinch. She didn't even look at him. Her eyes remained on Mr. Ando. Get your hands off her. The voice was not Mr. Ando's. It was Julian Thorne's. Thorne stood up. He was a big man, and for the first time that night, his presence felt like an advantage instead of a bluff. He looked at Markson with a cold, primal fury. I said, Thorne repeated, get your hands off her. Markson, seeing the look in the billionaire's eyes, recoiled as if he'd touched a hot stove, yanking his hand back from Elara. Mr. Thorne, sir, I apologize, Markson stammered. This employee is unstable. I will have her removed. You'll be quiet, Thorne snapped. Or I'll buy this restaurant and have you removed. Am I clear? Markson's mouth snapped shut with an audible click. Thorne turned to Elara. The anger was gone, replaced by a look of stunned, desperate awe. Miss Vance, is it? Yes, sir, Ilara said, her voice quiet again. My VPs, he gestured to David and Laura, who were staring at their plates as if they could will themselves to teleport, are apparently overpaid, underread, and incompetent. You are not. He paused, a new, calculating light in his eyes. You said the messengers are broken, not the logistics. That implies the deal is fixable. It's not that simple, sir, Ilara said. Please, Thorne said, and the word was a plea. Explain. Ilara looked at Mr. Ando and Mr. Sato. They hadn't moved. They were waiting. They were listening. Mr. Thorne, Ilara said, you've been treating this like a transaction. You want their money. But for Mr. Ando and Mr. Sato, this isn't a transaction. It's a relationship. You haven't been negotiating a deal. You've been insulting their partnership. She turned back to the Japanese executives and continued in their language. Thorne-san is a shark. He sees blood and he bites. But he is not, I think, a liar. He is simply American. He is fast. He is loud. He does not understand harmony. Mr. Sato actually cracked a small smile at that. But his logistics, Ilara said, his actual, physical, on-the-ground network, it's the best in the world. You know this, or you would not have taken the meeting. A brilliant machine, Mr. Ando conceded in Japanese, run by fools. So, Ilara countered, what if you had a new operator? What if you had a liaison? Someone who understands the Kitano Protocol and American arrogance? Someone who can read Section 7B and understand the value of Nemawashi? Someone who can translate not just your words, but your intent? A long silence hung in the air. Julian Thorne was watching the exchange like a man at a tennis match, his head whipping back and forth, his entire $2 billion future hanging on the words of a waitress he'd ignored all night. Mr. Ando looked at Ilara, a long, appraising stare. He was looking through her, seeing the years of study, the frustration, the hidden talent. You are offering yourself, Vance-san? He asked. I am, sir, Ilara said. I am offering my skills, because I believe the deal is sound, but it needs a bridge. Your team, she gestured to Thorne, has been shouting from one side of the chasm, and you have been standing silently on the other. And you, Mr. Sato said, you are the bridge. I can be. Mr. Ando was silent for a full minute. Then he turned to Julian Thorne. He spoke in English. Mr. Thorne, your presentation was an insult. Your team is a disgrace. You have wasted our time. Thorne's face tightened. Mr. Ando. However, Mr. Ando continued, Ms. Vance is correct. Your logistics are superior. The foundation is good, even if the house is on fire. He reached into his breast pocket and pulled out a sleek, black, metal business card case. He expertly snapped a card from the case and held it out. Not to Thorne, to Ilara. Ms. Ilara Vance, Mr. Ando said, his voice now warm. We are opening our New York office next month. We will be needing a chief liaison officer for our North American acquisitions. Ilara's hand was shaking as she took the card. My partner, Mr. Sato, and I will be staying at the peninsula for 2 more days. We have cancelled our flight. We will meet with you tomorrow at 9 a.m. You will represent Mr. Thorne's interests. You will redraft Section 7B. You will brief us on the Kitano Protocol. And if you are successful, he smiled, a real, genuine smile, we will discuss your salary, and Mr. Thorne will have his deal. He then turned to Julian Thorne. And you, Mr. Thorne, will pay her a consulting fee. Let's say $1 million for saving your company. Thorne, who had just watched his $2 billion deal get resurrected, just gaped. A million? Yes, of course, absolutely, And, Mr. Ando said, his eyes finding Mr. Markson, who was trying to melt into the expensive wallpaper, you will pay for our dinner, and you will ensure Miss Vance is escorted from this building with the respect she deserves, not as a waitress, but as your most valuable asset. The departure of Mr. Ando and Mr. Sato was not loud. It was a masterpiece of silent, devastating finality. They offered a final, respectful bow, not to Julian Thorne, the billionaire who had summoned them, but to Ilara Vance, the waitress who had served them water. Then, with their security detail parting the sea of gawking diners, they were gone. The vacuum they left behind was absolute. For a full 10 seconds, the 60-story-high onyx room was as silent as a tomb. The clinking of cutlery, the murmur of conversations, the distant city hum, it all ceased to exist. Every eye was locked on table 12, now a diorama of ruin and rebirth. The only sound was the faint, pathetic sizzle of a cooling filet mignon on a plate. Then, Julian Thorne moved. He didn't shout, he didn't scream. The change was far more terrifying. The loud, back-slapping, performative confidence he had worn all night evaporated, and what was left was something cold, dense, and brutally efficient. He was no longer a salesman. He was a predator who had just been wounded and saved in the same instant, and he needed to re-establish dominance over his own territory. He turned his head slowly, his gaze falling upon David Chen and Laura Reed. They were frozen, their faces the color of spoiled milk. "David," Thorne said, his voice a low, gravelly rumble that was somehow more menacing than a shout. "On your resume, it says conversational Japanese, does it not?" David swallowed, a pained, audible click in his throat. "Julian, it's been a while. It's mostly for social settings." "Social settings," Thorne repeated, the words dripping with acid. "So you can order a beer and find the bathroom. Is that what you meant? You sat there for 2 hours while our company was being dismantled in a language you claimed to understand. And you said nothing. You just nodded and smiled like a bobblehead in a hurricane." He leaned in closer. "Did you understand a single word she said?" "It was very formal," David stammered, his eyes darting around for an escape. "The syntax was complex." "Get out," Thorne said. "What?" "Get out," Thorne repeated, his voice dropping another octave. "Not just from this table, from my building, from my company, from my life. You're fired. Your access was revoked 5 minutes ago." He then swiveled his head to Laura Reed. She flinched as if he'd physically struck her. "And you," Thorne hissed. "Section 7B. A lazy copy-paste," she called it. "A lazy copy-paste that almost cost me everything." "Julian, it was a standard clause," Laura pleaded, her voice cracking. "It's boilerplate. Everyone uses it. It was an oversight, a simple oversight." Thorne slammed his fist on the table. The crystal glasses jumped, and a woman at a nearby table gasped. "Simple? Ms. Vance, a waitress making $20 an hour, saw it in 2 minutes. You, with your Ivy League law degree and your $500,000 salary, did not. You weren't just lazy. You were arrogant. You were condescending. You assumed they were fools, and in doing so, you made a fool out of me." "It's fixable," Laura whispered, tears now welling in her eyes. "We can redraft." "You will redraft nothing," Thorne snarled. "You're fired. Consider this your severance dinner. I'm sure it's the most expensive meal you'll ever have that you didn't pay for." He waved a dismissive hand, a Roman emperor banishing his failures. "Both of you, leave. Now." They sat for a moment longer, paralyzed by the sheer velocity of their professional demise. Then, humiliated under the gaze of the entire restaurant, they gathered their things and slunk away, their high-powered careers reduced to a walk of shame, past tables of whispering strangers. With the dead weight cut loose, Thorn turned his full, undivided attention to Elara. The anger was gone, replaced by a look of raw, desperate reverence. He looked at her as a drowning man looks at a piece of driftwood. "Ms. Vance," he said, his voice now laced with a humility she never would have thought him capable of. I don't know what to say. Thank you feels inadequate." "You don't have to say anything, Mr. Thorn," Elara said. She was unbuttoning the cuffs of her uniform, her movements deliberate. The room was still watching. "But you do have to listen. From now on—" "Yes," he said, nodding vigorously. "Absolutely. To you. The $1 million Mr. Ando mentioned. That's yours. Of course. Consider it a signing bonus. No, not a bonus, an apology, a retainer. You'll work for me, directly for me. We'll create a new position, VP of Global Strategy, Executive Director of Pacific Relations. Whatever you want. You'll have your own floor." He was trying to own her. He was throwing money and titles at her, trying to put her in a box, albeit a much more expensive one. He was trying to make her his asset. She could feel the ghost of her father wincing at the offer. Robert Vance would have taken that deal in a heartbeat. He would have become another man's tool. Elara finished unbuttoning her cuffs and began to pull off her stained black apron. "Thank you for the offer, Mr. Thorn," she said, her voice calm and level, cutting through his frantic energy. "But I won't be working for you." Thorn's face fell. The panic returned to his eyes. "What? But Mr. Ando said you would represent me. You have to." "Mr. Ando said I would represent your interests," Elara corrected him gently, folding the apron with the precision of a flag at a military funeral. "There's a difference. I will be his new chief liaison officer. My role is to be the bridge between you and him. A bridge cannot belong to one side of the river or the other. It must stand independently in the middle." She looked him directly in the eye. "My loyalty won't be to you, Mr. Thorn, nor to Mr. Ando. It will be to the deal, to the bridge itself. That's the only way it will hold." Thorn stared at her, his mind, accustomed to simple acquisitions and hostile takeovers, struggling to compute this new paradigm. He saw that she wasn't asking for a job. She was dictating the terms of her own existence within his world. She wasn't an employee. She was a sovereign state. After a long moment, he threw his head back and let out a short, sharp bark of a laugh. It was a sound of pure, unadulterated shock and admiration. "Of course," he said, shaking his head. "Of course you are. You're not a VP, you're the whole goddamn board." He extended a hand. 9 a.m. tomorrow, Ms. Vance. My car will be outside your apartment." "I'll take the subway, Mr. Thorn," Elara said, ignoring his hand and placing the folded apron and her name tag on the table. "But I'll be there." "Vance!" The voice was a pathetic whine. She turned. Mr. Markson was standing there, his slicked-back hair now disheveled, a sheen of sweat on his upper lip. His petty tyranny had vanished, replaced by the naked, sniveling fear of a man who knew he was about to be crushed. "Elara, listen," he began, taking a half step towards her. I was under a lot of pressure tonight. You know how it is. High-profile guests. I might have been a bit harsh." Elara said nothing. She simply stood there, her hands at her sides, watching him unravel. We can forget this happened, right?" he pleaded, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "Let's just let this be a strange night. You can have your job back. Of course you can. I'll even give you the good tables, all of them. You'll never have to deal with the likes of Mrs. Delacroix again." He was offering her scraps from the table she now owned. The irony was so profound, it was almost painful. She looked at this small, terrified man who had made her feel worthless for 2 years, who had delighted in his minuscule portion of power over her. She felt nothing. Not anger, not pity. Just a vast, quiet distance. She reached into her pocket. Her fingers found the cool, heavy, black metal card. She pulled it out, holding it between her thumb and forefinger. She didn't brandish it. She just held it. It was heavier than 1,000 of Markson's paychecks. "I don't think," she said, her voice soft as velvet, "I'll be needing this job anymore." She walked past him. He didn't dare try to stop her. She walked through the dining room, and the silence followed her. As she passed Mrs. Delacroix's table, she saw the woman staring, her mouth agape in a perfect O of disbelief, her hand frozen halfway to her glass of now tepid wine. Ilara met her gaze for a single, fleeting second and offered her nothing. Not a smile, not a sneer, just a blank slate. She was no longer worth the effort. The elevator doors opened with a soft ding. She stepped inside, her back straight, her head held high. As the polished doors began to slide shut, she heard one last, desperate "wait" from the dining room. The doors closed, encasing her in a small, brass-walled world of silence. The muffled sounds of the restaurant vanished. It was just her and her reflection in the mirrored wall. A woman in a cheap waitress uniform. She leaned her head against the cool metal. She looked down at the business card in her hand. Robert Ando, Chairman, A&S Global Capital, and under it, a private cell phone number. The dam broke. A single tear traced a path down her cheek, then another. They were not tears of joy or sadness or even relief. They were tears of ignition. Tears for the 10 lost years. Tears for her father's ghost. Tears for the scholar she had been forced to lock away. Each tear was a decade of humiliation, frustration, and silent endurance being burned away, leaving behind something new, something hard and bright and terrifyingly powerful. The quiet, polite waitress was gone. In her place, standing in the silent elevator 60 floors above the city, the bridge builder was born. Ilara did not take the subway. She couldn't. Her body was thrumming with an alien energy, a high-voltage current of adrenaline and disbelief that made the thought of being underground, packed in with other people, impossible. She needed the sky. She needed the air. She walked. She walked the 60 blocks from the glittering, silent peak of the Onyx Room to her small, third-floor walk-up in Queens. The black metal business card felt like a 20-pound weight in her coat pocket, a solid object of proof that the last 3 hours had not been a stress-induced hallucination. The October air was cold and sharp, and it felt incredible. She pulled the lapels of her thin coat tighter, the smell of truffle oil and old wine on her uniform now replaced by the city's honest scent of exhaust fumes, roasted nuts, and damp pavement. For the first 20 blocks, she just let her mind be silent, focusing on the rhythm of her sensible, worn-out shoes on the concrete. Click-clack, click-clack, the sound of her old life. But with every block, the fog of shock began to recede, and the new reality began to crystallize. She, Ilara Vance, the invisible waitress, had spoken, and the titans of the universe had not just listened, they had obeyed. She had fired 2 high-powered VPs. She had brought a multi-billion-dollar deal back from the dead. She had been offered a job that, just yesterday, she would have assumed didn't even exist. A sudden, giddy laugh bubbled up in her chest, so sharp and unexpected that a man walking his dog gave her a wide berth. She covered her mouth, the laugh turning into a half-sob. It was the laugh of a prisoner who, after years of chipping at a wall with a spoon, had just watched the entire fortress crumble at her feet. She had been living her life in Kego, the polite, formal language of self-effacement, always bowing, always apologizing, always making herself smaller. Moshiwake gozaimasen. I am so sorry for the trouble. Tada no waitoresu desu. I am only a waitress. But tonight she had used that same language as a weapon. She had used their assumptions, their arrogance, and their profound ignorance against them. And she had won. By the time she crossed the bridge into Queens, the adrenaline was fading, replaced by a bone-deep weariness and a new, cold terror. She had made a promise. She had called herself a bridge. Now she had to build it, and she had to do it by 9 a.m. She climbed the 3 flights of stairs, the smell of her building, stale onions and laundry detergent, a stark contrast to the world she had just left. She let herself into her apartment. Her mother, Evelyn, was asleep in her hospital-grade bed, which took up most of the small living room. An old black-and-white movie, Roman Holiday, was playing silently on the small television, its flickering light illuminating Evelyn's pale, tired face. Empty soda cans and a half-eaten sandwich were on the tray table beside her, a dinner Ilara hadn't been there to make. A hot, sharp pang of guilt shot through Ilara. This was the why. The endless shifts, the humiliation from men like Markson, the aching feet. It was all to pay for the medication on the nightstand, for the rented bed, for the food delivery apps on the bad days. She went to the sink to wash her face, the water icy cold. She looked at her reflection in the cracked mirror, the same tired eyes, the same pale skin, the same uniform, which she now realized she was still wearing. She looked like a ghost in a costume. Ilara. Honey, is that you? Evelyn's voice was thin and slurred, the way it always was when she was tired. Ilara quickly dried her face and went to her mother's side, fixing her pillows. Hey, Mum, I'm home. Did you have trouble with the remote again? It's just, the buttons are so small, Evelyn murmured, her gaze drifting to the silent film. How was work? That Markson, was he kind to you tonight? Ilara looked at her mother, at the woman who had taught her to be strong, now so fragile. How could she explain what had happened? It sounded like a fairy tale. Mum, Ilara began, her voice thick. I don't think I'll be working for Mr. Markson anymore. Evelyn's eyes snapped into focus, a mother's panic overriding the fatigue. What? Did he fire you? Oh, Ilara, no. What about the insurance? What about the rent? I told you not to talk back to him. Mum, no, he didn't fire me. Ilara took her mother's frail, cool hand. I quit. You quit? The word was a gasp. I quit, Ilara said, a new, fierce smile spreading across her face. And then I got a new job. Tonight, at the restaurant. It's complicated. A new job? As what? Head waitress? Ilara finally let herself laugh, a real, full laugh. No, as Chief Liaison Officer for Ando Thorn Pacific. I have a meeting at 9 a.m. to finalize the deal. Evelyn just stared at her. Ilara, what are you talking about? Are you okay? You sound manic. I am manic, Ilara whispered, the reality of it hitting her again. Mum, I have to work. I have a lot of work to do before 9 a.m. But I need you to know. I think everything is about to change. I think I'm going to fix everything. Evelyn's eyes, sharp and intelligent, searched her daughter's face. She saw the exhaustion, the panic, but she also saw something she hadn't seen in a decade. She saw fire. She saw Robert Vance, Ilara's father, in her eyes. All right, my little executive, Evelyn whispered, squeezing her hand. Go, work. I'll just watch Gregory Peck. Ilara kissed her mother's forehead, and went to the small desk in the corner of the room. She pulled out the keys to a set of footlockers she kept under her bed. They were labeled Kyoto. For the next 6 hours, the small Queen's apartment became a strategic war room. Ilara didn't just review her old notes. She resurrected a part of herself she'd been forced to bury. The apartment filled with the smell of old paper and fresh black coffee. She dug out her senior thesis, The Unseen Bridge, Nemawashi and Risk Aversion in Post-Bubble Japanese Trade. It was, she realized with a jolt, the exact topic of the failed meeting. She found her detailed analyses of the Osaka-Kobe trade route. Then she got to work. She didn't just read the new Kitano Port Protocol, she cross-referenced it with Thorne's known logistics network. She saw what David and Laura had missed. The protocol wasn't an obstacle, it was a back door. It offered a 15% tariff reduction for companies that used a specific new biofuel standard, a standard Thorne's shipping fleet already met. It was a multi-million-dollar gift, and they had been too arrogant to open it. Then she tackled Section 7B. She read the lazy copy-paste clause and snorted. It was a standard American litigation-first clause designed to win a lawsuit. It was pure Shark Tank mentality. "You're not a shark, Dad," she whispered to the empty room. "You were just a minnow who tried to swim with them." She deleted the entire section, and she started from scratch. She didn't write a legal clause. She wrote a cultural one. She drafted a new 3-page section, titled The Bilateral Harmony Protocol. It wasn't about liability, it was about resolution. It outlined a multi-step process for any disagreement. First, a private consultation. Second, a formal mediation led by the liaison office. And this was her master stroke. She was, in effect, writing her own job description and cementing her power. Only as a final, last-ditch resort could litigation be pursued. It was a contract built not on a foundation of mistrust, but on a mutual respect for the process. It was a bridge. It was her. At 8:45 a.m., she walked into the lobby of the Peninsula. She hadn't slept. She hadn't showered. She had simply changed into her one good suit, a severe black wool suit she had bought 6 years ago for her father's funeral. She felt, in that moment, like a warrior arming for battle. Julian Thorne was there, pacing the lobby, flanked by 2 new, sharp-looking lawyers in $1,000 suits. He looked like he hadn't slept either. "Ms. Vance," he said, rushing over, his relief palpable. "Thank God. My team and I have been drafting all night. We've got a new Section 7, a full apology letter." Ilara put up a single, steady hand. "Mr. Thorne," she said, her voice quiet, but carrying the authority of a judge. "With all due respect, your team is why we are here. Please let me handle this." Thorne stopped, his mouth open. The 2 lawyers looked at Ilara with open disdain. Who was this woman in the rumpled suit? But Thorne nodded. He had seen what she could do. "Okay, Ms. Vance, it's your room." She walked past him, to the elevator, and went up to the penthouse. Mr. Ando and Mr. Sato were waiting, dressed in casual, impossibly expensive-looking sweaters. They were drinking green tea and looking out over Central Park. "Good morning, Vance-san," Mr. Ando said, bowing. "Good morning, Ando-sama, Sato-sama," Ilara replied, bowing deeper. Thorne and his lawyers entered behind her, but they were, for all intents and purposes, invisible. Ilara was in charge. For the next 4 hours, she didn't just present, she taught. She didn't use a tablet or a slide deck. She used her words, binders of her own research, and a white-hot intellectual fire. She laid out the new Kitano Protocol and explained, in simple bottom-line terms, how it would save Thorne Logistics 15% on tariffs. Thorne's jaw literally dropped. His lawyers began scribbling furiously. Then she presented her new bilateral harmony protocol. Mr. Sato read it. Then he read it again, his pen hovering. He passed it to Mr. Ando. Mr. Ando read the 3-page section, his expression unreadable. The silence in the room was absolute, broken only by the sound of Julian Thorne's heavy breathing. Finally, Mr. Ando looked up. A slow, genuine smile spread across his face. "This," he said, tapping the paper, "is not a contract, Vance-san. This is a work of art. It is harmonious." "It's a bridge, sir," Elara said, her knees finally starting to shake. "That's all." "Indeed." Mr. Ando stood up. He walked over to Thorne. "Mr. Thorne, your company is saved. You will have this deal, and we will all, I suspect, be made very wealthy by it." Thorne, near tears with relief, grabbed Ando's hand. "Thank you. Thank you. And Ms. Vance, whatever you want, the $1 million consulting fee, consider it a signing bonus. You're my new VP of—" "She is not," Mr. Ando said, his voice firm but kind. He turned to Elara. "Ms. Vance will not be your vice president. She will be our director. She will run the Ando-Thorne liaison office. She will report to me. And she will be paid a salary that reflects her value." He named a number. It was a number so large that Elara felt the floor tilt. It was a number that didn't just pay her mother's medical bills. It was a number that could cure her. It was a number that erased her student loans, her father's debts, her entire life of just getting by. "Now," Mr. Ando said, his gaze softening as he turned back to Elara. "One last question, if I may. You said you were just a waitress. But you spoke of your father. You spoke of Section 7. This was personal for you, was it not?" Elara took a deep breath. She looked at Julian Thorne, at his relieved, grateful face, and she told the truth. "My father was Robert Vance," she said. "He ran Vance Logistics, a small 2-bit company compared to yours, Mr. Thorne. 10 years ago, he was negotiating a Pacific merger. He was, like you, arrogant, loud. He didn't read the fine print. He didn't— Listen, a much larger company used a hidden liability clause in Section 7 to bankrupt him. He lost everything." Julian Thorne's face went white. He knew the name. "Vance Logistics. My God. That was a subsidiary acquisition. It was 10, 12 years ago. I never even met. I didn't know." "You wouldn't?" Elara said, and there was no malice in her voice, only a profound, weary sadness. "He was just a small fish, but he was a good man. I spent the last 10 years studying so I would never make his mistake. I learned the language, I learned the law, I learned the culture, I learned to listen." She looked from Thorne to Ando. "Last night, I wasn't just saving your deal. I was saving my father's memory. I was proving he was wrong and that I was right." There was a long, respectful silence in the penthouse. "You have done more than that, Ms. Vance," Mr. Ando said, bowing his head. "You have honored him." 1 month later, there was a new office on the 61st floor, 1 floor above the Onyx Room. The frosted glass door read, "Ando-Thorne Pacific Liaison Office, Elara Vance, Director." Elara's first act was to move her mother out of the Queen's Walk-Up and into a sun-drenched apartment on the Upper West Side, with a view of the park and a 24-hour nursing staff. Evelyn, with the weight of their survival lifted from her, was already showing physical improvement. Her second act was to pay off her father's debts, all of them. Her third act was to have dinner at the Onyx Room. She made a reservation under her own name. She was led to table 12, the best in the house. The new manager, a polite, terrified young woman, personally took her order. Mr. Markson, she learned, had been fired the morning after her resignation. Mrs. Delacroix, upon hearing the story, had apparently been so embarrassed she hadn't been back since. Ilara ordered a simple steak and a glass of Cabernet. As she ate, she watched the staff move like shadows. A young waitress, her hair pulled back in the same tight bun Ilara had worn, came to refill her water. The girl was young, probably a student, her eyes wide with fear and exhaustion. She spilled a single drop of water on the tablecloth. "Oh my God," the waitress whispered, her face draining of color. "Ma'am, I am so sorry. I'll get a new cloth." Ilara reached out and gently touched the girl's arm. The girl flinched, expecting to be yelled at. "It's just water," Ilara said, her voice warm. "Don't worry about it. You're doing a great job." She looked the girl in the eyes. "What's your name?" It's Sarah, ma'am," the girl squeaked. "Sarah," Ilara said, "relax. Don't let anyone in this room make you feel invisible. You never know who's listening." Sarah looked at her, confused but nodded. Ilara turned back to her meal, a silent guardian in a world that had, for so long, refused to see her. She finished her dinner, paid her bill, and on the tip line, she wrote in a $500 tip. As she left, she looked at her reflection in the glass, with the city lights twinkling behind her, and for the first time, she wasn't just Ilara Vance, the daughter, or Ilara Vance, the waitress. She was Ilara Vance, the bridge, and she was finally, completely visible. And that's where Ilara's story really begins. It's a powerful reminder that your current situation is not your final destination. Ilara was a waitress, but she was never just a waitress. She was a scholar, a strategist, and a survivor, all hidden in plain sight. This story teaches us that the world will always try to put you in a box. They'll label you, ignore you, and underestimate you. Let them. The loudest person in the room is often the weakest. True power, true strength, is not in shouting. It's in listening. It's in doing the work. It's in being so prepared that when your one moment comes, you don't just seize it, you become it. Ilara didn't just get a new job. She reclaimed her family's honor and built a bridge between two worlds. So who in your life are you underestimating? Or more importantly, who is underestimating you? Let me know in the comments below. Thank you for watching. If this story moved you, please give this video a like and hit that share button. And if you want more true stories about life's hidden heroes and incredible twists of fate, make sure you subscribe to the channel. You never know what you might hear.